Hello, and welcome everyone to day 3 of YOUniverse and day 2 of our speaker series. I hope everybody's excited and ready for today's speaker series because we have a star-studded lineup. But I thought I'd actually kind of kick things off by just doing a little State of the Union now, State of the Union of our sales, where we are right now. Like, real talk, your buyer doesn't care about you. They don't care about your product. They don't care about your service. Maybe it's because like the marketplace is oversaturated. You got too many options out there. Maybe it's because the buyer is more sophisticated now. They have a lot of choices. They can sort through good information and make their decision even before they've contacted you. You know, for this product-centric selling, it's like fundamentally broken. It's about time to abandon that playbook and, you know, adopt a playbook that actually matches the evolution of the marketplace. So problem selling framework, that's the way to go. And the way you get down to the heart of the problem is by caring and understanding the person. So I am thrilled, absolutely thrilled to be able to introduce my 2 guests on today's show for YOUniverse. We have, lost my screen here for a second, but we have the renowned, come on, Keenan, author of Gap Selling, who is also a ski buff, but I got to throw this out there, a Jeep enthusiast. If you haven't seen the beast that he has out there right now, dang, that is pretty remarkable. Keenan is the CEO, president, and founder of A Sales Guy, is a chief antagonist. Keenan, tell me, what is a chief antagonist, man?
Look, you can't get anything done. You can't create change unless you antagonize. What do you think a washer does, right? Right? It agitates, right? It antagonizes to get things changed and clean. So yeah, man, that's what I do.
Love it. Excellent. And also joining us today, actually from the team here at Alyce, is Mike Goldenberg, who is an amateur artist, an expert beachgoer, and a bulldog and sneaker aficionado. What kind of sneaks you got going on today, Mike? You got anything fancy? Any Jordans?
Today I am actually wearing socks. I haven't been dipping into the sneaker collection as much as I usually do the last few weeks. But nonetheless, hopefully I'll be at the beach sooner than later.
You gotta be watching Black. You gotta be watching Black AF. You see his sneakers, his kicks are legit.
Nice.
Have you been watching that?
I haven't. No. How about you, Mike?
I have not seen that. What is that?
Watch Black AF and every other Kenya. Kenya, I forget his last name. The guy who did Blackish. Every show, he's got a different pair of super dope high-end kicks that I'm sure cost $5,000 each. I mean, it's fire.
I like to wear them. I don't like to put them away in like a museum, but I'll definitely be checking it out just to see what he's up to.
Yeah.
Well, nice. Well, I'm not going to stand in the way of this conversation. You guys are already jumping in. I'm going to dip out. Mike, as the VP of sales, have fun spending time with Keenan, getting to pick his brain, talking about all things PX and Gap selling.
Yeah, thank you very much, MK. Always a pleasure. And Keenan, obviously super psyched to, you know, have this conversation today. You know, it's funny, we have a lot of different things in common. So people may or may not realize, you know, Keenan is also a Boston guy. He's a South Shore guy originally. I'm a North Shore guy, but, you know, we can make peace there somewhere in the middle in Boston. Also, University of Colorado guy. I was a huge Colorado fan back in the day. Rashawn Salam, Cordell Stewart, Michael Westbrook.
Yep.
The Miracle throw, whatever.
It was legit. And then we just fucked that whole thing up and have not been able to get back since. Oh.
Exactly. So that was my starter jacket back in the day, was the Buffaloes, all right? And you know, of all the things about Keenan that impresses me, and obviously the list is pretty impressive, is that he is a ski instructor at Vail. That is the thing that I am probably most jealous of in terms of anything, because the first time I went to Vail and I went to China Bowl, as any skier out there, if you ever go, it's like you've landed in heaven. So I'm very jealous of that. But also, you know, it's super excited to have this conversation. Because, you know, I think you don't need me to tell you, you are a thought leader in the B2B space. And I think a lot of people are looking for guidance right now. Just to kick it off, though, what I wanted to do is, you know, and I'm not going to have you explain the whole book and any of that stuff, but I'd love to just, you know, hear the quick background in terms of, you know, because having read some of your early work and things, how did you go from being, you know, Jim Keenan, which originally I always thought your first name was Keenan. How did you go from being Jim Keenan to Keenan? and not just in name, but kind of that progression of, you know, going from a sales guy to an entrepreneur to, you know, B2B celebrity in ways to, you know, basically building out your own sales methodology. I'd love to just hear that, you know, how that evolution came about.
Wow. That is a big question that no one's really ever asked me before. So I'm going to answer it this way. Awareness and action. So I became aware that my career was outpacing my age and my quote unquote years of experience, not my expertise and capabilities, but my years of experience. I was always really young for the size of the jobs that I had.
Yep.
And so if I lost my job for whatever particular reason, it took too long to find a new job. So I became aware of that, and it was difficult to keep the trajectory, and or if I did, it would take a long time in between jobs, right? I'd lose one and then take 6 months, a year to find a new one without going backwards because I'd be competing with people 15, 20 years older than me, right? So that was the awareness. So I said, I'm going to stop blogging. Had the awareness to blog, and the simple objective with the blog was I will see if I can build an audience of maybe 1,000 people, and if I ever need a job, all I have to do is say on the blog, hey, I'm looking for a gig, and they'll know me. Like, I'll have showed them what I know because I've blogged about all the stuff that we do, and they're following me because they like my content, and they'll know that I know what I'm talking about, so that they're like, oh, I'll hire this guy, or I can give him to someone. That was the idea. 712 blog posts later, all of a sudden, everybody knows who I am, and I've been named top sales blog, top sales influencer, and you know, so all of a sudden people are paying attention and reaching out. And next thing, so I had the awareness that this was going on, and someone said, do you do consulting? And I said, okay. And I threw out a number, and they took it. So I had the awareness to see that was going on. And so really, it was just a whole bunch of steps that I took action, was aware of what was going on. And so as that went on, Jill Conrath, of all people, actually I give credit. You know Jill Conrath?
Yeah, of course.
Yes, she gets credit for helping with my brand. We were at a conference together, and she said, why do you always wear that same plaid shirt? And I'm like, I don't. And she goes, well, every time I see you in it, and she goes, it's like your brand. The minute she said it was like your brand, it clicked. And so that would have to be blue and red. But right from that day on, I was like, okay, I'm going to wear the same red, not the same red plaid shirt, but I'm going to wear a red plaid shirt because that's my company colors. And so I just built on that. And then everybody called me Keenan. My friends called me Keenan. When I played football, they called me Keenan. And gym is boring. And so I was like, fuck it. I'm just going to make people call me Keenan. And then I would get the social media, you know, at Keenan on Twitter. And so I just said, well, fuck it. Just go all in. So it's just awareness and action, awareness and action.
Yeah. And I love that because, you know, it's like you started with kind of an awareness of some of these smaller things. And then I think eventually it sounds like you realized you were building towards something much bigger. And then you could fold in the pieces and it all became a part of the bigger thing, which is building the brand.
Yep.
And what's interesting is, and it touches on something we were talking about literally right before we, you know, kick this thing off, which is, you know, the power of creating personal brands. And I think a lot of reps, you know, feel very intimidated by trying to do this, and salespeople in general, right? It's like, you know, they're intimidated by the idea, like, I don't want to be another blowhard out there, just like, you know, spouting off, you know, what I think and things like that. And they struggle to do it. But, you know, I think you have a really interesting perspective on why that's so important, you know, for people. So I'd love to kind of just dig in, like what you tell people in terms of why it's so important to build that brand out for themselves, even if they don't want to be a blogger or consultant or things like that.
Well, so I want to hit to that because I think there's a bigger underlying issue before I tell them why it's important. Yep. And this does not endear me to too many people, okay? But I believe it. And I don't believe it, although it's going to come across this way. I don't believe it because I think less of people. And I don't believe it because I don't like people. I believe it for the exact opposite. I believe because I absolutely love people. I'm a huge people person. And it drives me insane that people are like this. So it's actually out of love. The reason most people say they don't want to be a thought leader and they don't want to spout this off and write this is because you fucking can't. It's really because you can't. It's because you know deep down inside, you've never committed to your craft, that you've never become a master. You're just a simple ass journeyman because it does enough to pay the fucking bills, to get you out on the weekend, to keep you from getting fired, to just make President's Club, and to just go along. You do not actually try to be an expert. You don't try to be a master. You don't try to elevate the game. You don't try to elevate the craft. So the reason you don't want to do this is because you know deep down inside, subconsciously or consciously, you fucking can't. You know, you don't have the confidence to know that you can actually deliver something that would be of value. You don't actually know anything new. You've never actually taken what you had and tweaked it and created your own processes, your own ideas that you can actually teach people shit. Because you've just taken what people told you, you did just enough to fucking get along, and you know that inside, and it doesn't feel good. That's why they don't do it. And I'm sorry, and I don't mean to be an ass, and if it works for you, it works for you. But when it comes to stepping out and actually putting stuff online and teaching people, you know that you won't be good, and rather than own it, you bag it. You bag on people doing it, and you don't go there. And that's why we people don't do it. Because most of us don't grow up and say, I want to be in sales or I want to do this. We find ourselves here and we do just enough to get along and keep going and get us what we need.
Yeah, no, and you know, it's funny, right? You're getting really to the root of it, right? Is that, you know, forget about the concerns of wanting to put yourself out there, but it's even bigger. It's that, you know, you're not dedicating yourself to the craft enough to feel like you have something valuable to say. Which is interesting because, and it's a true point, right? It's like we grow up wanting to be, you know, I thought I was going to be the next, you know, white Jewish Jordan, you know, out there, you know, or whatever.
There was a white Jewish Jordan. Who was that?
Ooh, white chocolate?
You said I want to be the next Jewish Jordan, implying there was a Jewish Jordan at one time.
Oh, no. I'm just saying I want to be the next Jordan who was just a shorter, stockier, you know, Jewish version.
Yeah, got it.
But it's interesting because a lot of people don't necessarily, like, you're right. They like end up in it and then they don't think to them. They don't truly dedicate themselves to say like, I'm going to be a true fucking pro. Like I am going to, you know, you look at all the best professionals at anything. It's not, you know, yeah, you can say LeBron, Kobe, Jordan, whoever else, you know, the gifted, the talent, the size, whatever, the athleticism. But like none of those people got to where they were without really a huge dedication to their craft that most people underestimate, you know, in many ways. So, you know, in terms of that, you know, is it just a matter of, you know, you think that this is like a bigger issue plaguing the sales kind of space in general, that you have a lot of people
it's plaguing society in general. It is plaguing society in general. But yeah, okay, I'll stick with sales. Absolutely. Look, I don't have the time, money, or expertise to dig into why, and I'm sure maybe some psychologists have. Yeah. But no, I believe 90% of most people, I'll go with 80. I'll go with 80% of most people do just enough to be good enough, and that's good enough for them, right?
My old man used to tell me 90% of people suck at their job. Don't be one of them.
Yes, thank you. And it's a commitment thing, right? So I tell people all the time, and I should tell myself this all the time, I should be thrilled that most people aren't very good with their job because they're not good is why some people are good, right? Just because no one else is trying.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because this has been kind of one of my things lately is, you know, because everyone's talking, obviously the hot topic is COVID right now. And you see all these, you know, notes about, you know, here's how you sell in COVID. Here's how you know, and it's like, you read through most of these things and it's like, yeah, isn't that the same shit we were supposed to be doing before? Like my big thing is fundamentally nothing has actually changed in terms of the way that you should be selling. Nope. The biggest difference is, I believe now, is the consequences for it, because you are going to see, you know, that thinning of the herd where, you know, those people who are just getting by, you know, are really going to struggle versus the people who are like really digging in and figuring out ways to really just do the things they should have been doing anyway.
Yep. You nailed it. Can't add anything to it. Absolutely.
All that being said, I'm curious to hear, like, you know, you have a really good read, I think, based on just all of the conversations that you're having with other, you know, sales organizations, things like that. You know, what's your, you know, feeling on, you know, the current state of things and, you know, what you think is going to kind of evolve in the next, call it 6 to 12 months?
Oof, I've never been a good prognosticator. I don't know why. I'm more of a counterpuncher.
All right. Maybe another way to set is like, all right, in terms of what's going to happen in the next 6 to 12 months, how do you think, you know, sales reps, people can kind of best position themselves, you know, to be successful?
Yeah. So that, like you said, I think that just means getting better at the things that matter and work, right? So I said before, right now, if you're selling in this environment and your product or service does not alleviate, mitigate, or improve someone's environment in COVID, then you shouldn't be selling it. For starters, just stop, right? Or you shouldn't be selling it to them, and you should look for ways that your product or service can improve, alleviate, mitigate, or improve the current environment. So I think the first thing salespeople and organizations need to do is get a better understanding of their place in this ecosystem or their place in this current environment, right? So I did a chat like this not too long ago with Jake Dunlap, and we were talking about office furniture, right? And some cat sending out office furniture, and this was, right when this first went down, or in the middle of it. Office furniture, really? Like, that's where your head is? And then Jake had a great point, which I loved, and we flipped it. It was like, if you're selling office furniture to executives who now have to build out their home offices, okay, now you've kind of got my attention. I mean, it's not going to be much more than a chair and a desk, but still, you got my attention. In other words, how are you relevant to the challenges and problems that your buyers or potential customers have? And I think in the past, most salespeople have not paid attention to that. They're too busy saying, buy my energy drink, it's going to give you energy. Buy my energy drink, it's going to give you energy. Not being in tune to what environment their buyer is in. And so what I tell salespeople all the time, before and now, is how in tune are you? How in tune are you to the environment that your buyers are in? And then how well does your product or service impact positively that environment for them, and why? And if you don't know those answers and can't get them, you're wasting your time.
Yeah, and I think what a lot of people struggle with, right? Because the obvious thing is like, you've got to be able to solve a problem for someone. You have to be relevant to them and their current, situation. But I also think where a lot of reps struggle is, obviously they're drinking the Kool-Aid of their product and things like that, and their company, and even the problems and the value that their company delivers. And it's like, in their mind, it is relevant. In their mind, this is something that people should be caring about and thinking about. But I guess, what guidance, would you give people to say, like, here's how you can better understand if you are actually relevant to them right now?
Context, right? I use one of the dumbest, context and information. I use one of the dumbest, but yes, most effective similes in my training. I say to everybody, okay, raise your hand if you feel that taking 3 hours to get ready in the morning is a problem for somebody. Almost everybody raises their hand. They're like, yeah, that's a problem. Yeah, that's a problem, right? And then I say, okay, now what if I tell you that the person who takes 3 hours to get ready every morning is a billionaire and that has no job and has nothing to do? Is that still a problem? And all the hands start to come back down. And I go, that is my point. When you think something is a problem for somebody and you don't know their situation, you're projecting. And so therefore you're completely wrong. Now you can assume it could be problematic, and you can use that as a guide to go in and start asking questions, right? Have you ever been late to work? No, I don't have a job. Oh, have you ever been late to picking up your kids? No, I don't have kids. Oh, and you'll start to realize that even if it takes them 6 hours to get ready, this isn't a problem. A problem is defined not by the task or the outcome, but by the impact. And so whatever your product or service sells, and everybody tells you, oh, they don't have enough energy, it gives you energy, you don't have enough energy, that's a problem, you have no energy. In COVID without a job, and it's not a problem for me. So your job is to stop thinking about you, and your job is to start thinking about the buyer or the company you sell to, and ask yourself, what could this specific, unique person or company be dealing with? What do I know about them?
Yep.
And what can I assume about them? And what can I get them talking about to find out if they actually have that problem, number one? And more importantly, number two, how is it impacting them? And can I define the impact? If I cannot define the impact, if there is no impact, then the problem really doesn't exist. It's not a problem, and you're wasting your time. And people don't do that.
So when you say defining the impact, I mean, are we talking, just in terms of being able to say, because, right, a lot of times people say, yeah, we need to create more pipeline. We need to do more of whatever, right?
Yep.
Is defining the problem, does it have to be, as specific as a number or metric, or they just have to agree that this is a fundamental problem for them that they are committed to?
Sometimes it's a number, sometimes it's not. So again, I use this dumb metaphor, but I play it all the way out. It's if it takes you 3 hours to get ready And one, you're late to work 20% of the time. Have you ever been missed a promotion? Yes. Are you up for another promotion? Yes. Do you think you'll get it? No. So what is that promotion to? How long has the other person had the job? How is that affected? It's probably cost me this much money and I haven't had this job and I'm not getting to where I want to get. So that's the impact is my career is stunted and money's part of it, but it's not just money, right? Another one. Okay, I'm not late to work, but I'm late to picking up the kids from school. Okay, or getting the, right? Have you ever been, how late? One time an hour. So what did kids do? They sat there. CPS was called. Oh, so you had to go defend yourself for leaving the kids at school. One of the kids got lost. Holy shit, are you at risk of losing your kid? That's a fucking massive impact.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not a number.
Well,
It's
one
not-
kid. You only lost one kid, but yeah.
Yes. But my point is, it's not, yes, it's the, see what I'm saying? That's
Yep.
how you define impact. And so there's no way in the world that a salesperson can know the impact, the definable impact to any customer until you actually sit down and have a conversation with them and go through that journey. And when you're product-centric, you never get to that.
Yep.
You never get to that. And that's where you win.
So do you think that, you know, and this kind of plays into this whole concept, you know, around the 5 to 9 and things like that. So in terms of, you know, getting the chance to dig in and ask those questions, right? Because a lot of what I took away from what you were just saying there is, you know, it's you know, the tale as old as time for sales, right? You've got to dig in, you've got to listen, you've got to really actively listen and understand and not just project your own thoughts about what they're thinking, but really listen. How do you see the balance of trying to like build a relationship and get personal with someone and create that bond versus starting with the, here's all the problems that I can solve for you kind of thing?
Yeah, so to me, it's about credibility, not likability. So if someone can demonstrate a level of credibility with me, that they understand my problem, they understand who I am, they understand what I'm struggling with, they understand my day to day, if it's in sales or if it's a doctor and someone can understand what type of pain I'm having or can understand the impact of that pain or understand how it's affecting me, they win. Like if you earn credibility with somebody, they gravitate to you like nobody's business.
Yep.
Right? And you become an asset to them and they want you around. Right?
So, yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. So as a doctor, you get credibility because you walk in with the stethoscope and the jacket and the diploma on the wall and it's like, boom, credibility, right?
No, actually, I disagree. All you get is a chance to be heard. That's why people ask for second opinions. And that's why when doctors don't ask the right questions or they just say, hey, look, I'm really not sure. Go home, try this and let me know what happens. Almost every person I've ever talked to, and again, another metaphor I use often is this doctor thing. And almost everybody raises their hand when I said, have you ever been to a doctor? The doctor asks you 2 or 3 questions, says he wasn't sure, says she wasn't sure, said, try this and let me know what happens. Everybody hand go up. And I said, have you ever had a doctor where she asked all these random questions like, what'd you have to eat last week at 2:30, right? Does your blah, blah, blah happen here? And you're like, why are they asking me these dumb, do you knit with wool? And like, what the fuck she and then all of a sudden they're like, I think it might be this. Like, whoa. And a bunch of hands go up, right? It's not the suit that gives you the credibility. It's your understanding of what is going on that makes you feel like, hey, this person knows their shit. I want to give them a chance. I think they can help me. They know their shit.
True, but pointing back at that doctor analogy, right? Some random person starts asking you those questions off the street, you know, they're not going to have that credibility. It's them, the authority of them being a doctor that, you know, allows you to continue or start to answer those questions.
I say it's the title that gives you that. He's a doctor, she's a doctor. So I infer a level of a baseline level,
Yep.
right? So as a salesperson, you're inferring a baseline understanding of your product that gets you in the door, but it doesn't earn you credibility to understanding their problem. Don't confuse the two.
Yep. So then, all right, let's just say, 30-something-year-old salesperson talking to CFO, CIO, whoever it may be, right?
Yep.
How do you think people best build that credibility, with those, type of higher level,
Study, learn the job. If I'm selling to someone, I want to know the whole job of the person I'm selling to, right? So if I'm selling to a CIO, I want to ask myself, what are the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 KPIs that most CIOs are measured on? Based on those, let's say 5 KPIs, what are the 5 or 6 or even 10 things that negatively impact those KPIs, right? So if it's KPI 1, right? What are the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 things that negatively impact that KPI? And then the same thing on the other one, right? Then I want to understand what are they, how do those things play out? And then from that, then I can start having questions and conversations around the things that negatively impact them, why those things are put in the first place, what the expected outcome was, what some of the alternatives are, not from a product perspective, but just from a methodology, a process, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And the CI is like, damn, like, how do you know about this? Or, yeah, this person gets it.
So, yeah, I totally agree. It's like, you know, to me, it's the knowledge is power, right? The more you understand what they actually give a shit about, the more you're going to be able to have a conversation, and you can be more proactive in those comments, right? Hey, I know that XYZ is typically important to you, but here's what I want to understand, versus those very general open questions that don't kind of show that you belong in the conversation yet.
Put it this way. Do it. I think another way of looking at it, and it's hard to do this because I think it's very specific. So when I'm asked to do it broadly, I have a hard time. But here's an example. I did a video not too long, well, I guess a year ago, on cold calling. And I had been working with this young cat who sold a particular type of laser treatment for removing cancer cells, right? And as I dug in with him, what their product did was it allowed a much, 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 much tighter cut around the tumor. So you took less healthy tissue, but still made sure you got the whole tumor. Because what many doctors struggled with was either they took too much healthy tissue and damaged the organ, or they took too little of the tumor and it came back, right? Yep. So what this kid was able to do is, and what I taught him to do, was stop talking about all this other stuff. Start talking to the doctors about their process for ensuring they minimize the impact to the healthy tissue and the steps they use to do that, right, in order to maximize the removal of the tumor and mitigate the recidivism, I think the word was, while still protecting. And so when he started having that type of conversation with the doctor, it changed the level of credibility, because he was at a level, he didn't say, hey, I know you have this problem. He poses a question and is like, do you struggle? And he used much more technical terms, blah, blah. And the doctor's like, whoa, this cat gets it. Talk to me more.
Yep.
You see the difference?
100%. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, you know, it's funny when I think of gap selling, which, you know, by the way, the entire Alyce sales team has read. So we're big fans. But, you know, it'd be great, instead of like having you describe the gap selling process or method, it'd be great to just hear you like talk about how you feel like it's different, like from that perspective of that buyer, right? Like, how is their experience different when dealing with someone who's leveraging kind of the gap method versus, let's call it you know, your typical Sandler, Heimer, you know, all the others, you know, Spin, Challenger, you name it.
Yep. I think that the two things are the biggest differences. The first biggest difference is so much more time is spent talking about the buyer in the buyer's world. I tell people that if you are a dope ass gap seller, you almost spend no time talking about your product. You're literally able to get the buyer to spend. I just got a text actually from one of my salespeople. He's like, I just got finished with an hour and 45-minute discovery call. Now, I haven't heard the recording, but I'm pretty comfortable that if that buyer sat with him for an hour and 45, the buyer was getting value out of it.
Yep.
Right. And so that's the big difference to me when it comes to gap selling, is you are able to create an environment where eventually the buyer lets down their guard and lets you help them. And through the questions and the dialogue and the engagement, they're getting so much value in being asked to think about their environment, think about the problems they're struggling with, think about the current state, what's going on, what do they want to achieve, why aren't they there yet, what have been the impediments, And they're enthralled. They're like, this is great. I never thought about this. And I forgot about this. And it's like a therapy session. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
That's the big difference, is they forget it's a sales call because you're all involved in that conversation.
So where do you think that most reps, where do you think most reps miss then in terms of, because everyone's doing discovery calls, but, I think a lot of reps feel this pressure early on where it's like, they want to get through some of their, questions and get a high level discovery, but they feel this pressure where it's like, listen, this person has, come on here to understand like how I can help them. How do you avoid just annoying the shit out of them by just asking a million questions versus like, balancing that with giving them some teaser or something back where they feel like they are getting that value?
The difference is that when you're asking, most people want a discovery, they're trying to find a single problem they can quickly attach their product to, right? Yep. 9 out of 10 times my experience shown is they're trying to find what I call the root cause, right? And they find one root cause, and let's say, I'm making this up, a company has disparate systems and they can't do reporting. I got a problem. And they try to lock onto that. That's what I call a root cause or technical problem. And I say, so the fuck what? Why? Who cares if they can't do reporting? Who cares if they have disparate systems? How does that affect the business? And no one's thought to ask the question how it affects the business. So that's why a lot of deals die and when they go into the black hole, because no one forced the buyer or the salesperson didn't play that all the way out to find that, it's inconvenient, but the truth of the matter is the impact on business is almost nominal. So it really isn't the problem, right? Yep. So in gap selling, and what we teach people to do is you don't go in looking for that one thing to sell the product, number one. Number two, you set the expectation with the buyer that you don't even know that you can help them. You really would just like to understand what's going on and this quote unquote, what they're struggling with. You shift the buyer's mind off of, I'm here to show you something, to I'm here to figure out what is going on and what's wrong. And if we can come to that conclusion together, I will then show you how we can fix it. It's never about, I'll show you my product. It's what's wrong and I'll show you how we can fix it versus what are you doing and let me give you a product.
Yeah. And it's almost like with politicians, right? It's not about the platform that they're talking about. It's about kind of the internal horse race, right? So like logically, to your point, like there may be a bunch of problems that you can identify and maybe even some of the roots of the problems and things like that. But what you're missing is like the politics of it in terms of what do they actually care about? What are the things that are truly impacting their business? Because a problem unto itself doesn't mean it's a problem that is top priority to solve.
Yep.
So getting to what are those bigger company-wide initiatives and trying to figure out if there are, initiatives that you can attach to seems like kind of the bigger thing that you're trying to get to versus just, is there a problem that we can, you got a problem here, you want it to be better there, fill the gap there. It's much more about understanding the bigger picture of the company, it sounds like.
Not always the bigger of the company, because it could be too big, right? It just has to be the size of the problem for the person who's trying to solve it and what the impact is, right? And then that depends on how much you're asking or what the cost to fix it is at the end. But no, it could very well easily be just how it's affecting that person or that division, but you still want the impact. Because the impact is the motivation. That's what people don't understand. The motivation to fix it is out of the impact. So again, if we go back to that cheesy example about taking 3 hours to get ready in the morning, the impact is almost nominal. If I'm a billionaire, Paris Hilton, who doesn't have a whole lot of things, and my friends all call me late Paris because I'm never on time, but the impact of that, no one gives a fuck, right? She's got the money. She can do whatever she wants. Everybody wants her, and so no impact. The single dad who's got 2 kids and a crazy ex-wife, or the single mom with a crazy ex-husband who is looking for any chance they can to take the kids away and is trying to get their job, to get a promotion in the job, and they've missed the promotion and they get CPS breathing down their neck. That is a massive impact, right? And so how motivated, notice what I'm doing here, how motivated do you think that dad is going to be, or that mom is going to be, to fix that problem if there's a risk they could lose their kids?
Yep.
It's about the motivation. The whole sales world in the past has been dancing around this whole pretty little picture, and I can't understand why. At the end of the day, we have to hit the motivation. I don't want to guess. I'm going to get you to tell me what it is, and in many cases, get you to realize what it is because you didn't realize it in the first place. And then once I take it from way inside subconscious, bring it out of your mouth, put it on a plate with a fucking piece of parsley and drop it on your ass, all of a sudden you're ready to buy.
Yep.
Right? It's the motivation, and there is no motivation without big impact, and that's the gap.
Yep. Yep. So in the case where, you're talking to someone, right? And, you're struggling to get to an impact that seems reasonable. They seem like they don't understand, the future state of where they're trying to go even. Is that time to just kind of move on or?
Yep. I literally say, and it's funny, not only was he one of my biggest clients, or I should say our biggest clients, and a positive testimonial, and we work with him for 7-8 months or whatever. The original discovery call, which I did, right, one of my last discovery calls, and I like to think I'm good, but everybody messes up. Tiger puts it in the drink too. I couldn't find anything. Like everything, they're growing by 20% and blah, blah, blah. Like everything was fine. So I finally said to him, I said, we could probably use his name. He does a testimonial for us. But I finally said, Craig, I don't see that we can help you. Seems to me you've got your act together. And some of these smaller problems, I think you'd like to get rid of them, and I don't see how they're creating an impact, so I don't know why you'd make the investment. And he said, yeah, I know, and he goes, let me go back and think. And he got off the phone, he called me like a week later, and he goes, I know what the problem is. I don't think we are maximized, and I think 20% is we're underperforming, and the reason is we don't have a common sales methodology, and so it's not repeatable, and so I think we're leaving, I'm making up some number, XYZ on the table.
Yep.
Oh, and the minute that clicked for him, I dug in more, then we got it, and we moved forward, and we made big impact in his organization, right? So my point in telling you the story is, when I couldn't find it after about a 45-minute, he liked the conversation, I was out. Done, I'm gone. I didn't say, well, let me just tell you about gap selling. I didn't do that. He came back to me, and it was a big deal. So yes, if you don't find it, get the fuck out, move on.
Interesting.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, that's like, I'm not at all surprised to hear that. And, that's always what that's kind of a little bit almost like, and I don't want to attach it too much, but like, the Sandler pain funnel and being able to like negative reverse people when you aren't able to get down to, how is this truly going to impact people? And then, obviously get them to buy into that. But it's not a tactic or a trick. Like, it's just being honest and authentic, right? And notice, I don't spend much time on the future state, which I talk about in the gap selling, what you described is how is this positively going to affect them. In a discovery in these early conversations, I don't talk about that very much. Yeah. I go the other side, and I make you tell me what the problem is and how it's totally negatively affecting you today. I want to hear, proverbially speaking, right? I want to hear that you're about to lose the kids because you keep getting them late from school and they're sitting on the front of the school with no adults around for 40 minutes. That's what I want to hear, right? Not. Yeah. No, I was going to say, I think where most reps struggle, and I don't know the answer to how you get them over this hurdle, is how do they have the confidence to ask that last question, right? Like, because it's like, oh, like you might be late to pick up the kids. What happens if you're late to pick up the kids, like in that bigger impact?
So notice what you did. I love where you're going, but notice what you did. I think this is the hardest part for reps.
Yeah.
Even in your statement, it was still somewhat of a future tense. What happens if you're late? No. This is the salespeople and marketing have ingrained us to think about the future. The question should be, have you ever been late to pick up the kids? Right? One is ethereal, hasn't happened. I'm postulating. One is, yes, I have been late. What happened? Right? How long were you late? How many times have you been late? When you got there, what were the kids doing? Right?
Yeah.
And then through those questions, you get to say, well, look, it's only been a couple times, but one time I was an hour and a half late. The kids literally sat in the rain. CPS was called. Oh shit, what happened when CPS was called? They came out to my house. They did a whole review. My ex-wife is now logged out with the courts. Oh shit, tell me about your ex-wife. Well, she's been trying to get full custody for a while. Oh my God, see what I'm doing here?
Yep.
The first one, what happens if? Fuck what happens if. This should be enough. And what's going on right now?
Yeah.
you don't want to keep living with. And remember I said, I'm going to get you to take it in here, throw it up, put it on a plate, I'm going to put parsley on it and deliver it to you. That's entirely different than what happens if.
Yeah. No, I love it because I do think, we tend to frame things as, what's the impact? Well, what happens if you guys don't hit your numbers? What happens if you don't?
Yeah.
But it's more of, have you missed your numbers before? What happened when you didn't, hit those numbers?
Yes. That's where the win is, dog. That's why I call it the current state.
Yeah.
Currently, because dude, notice now I'm watching the light bulb go off in your head. Dude, once you do that, that's where the motivation to change comes from.
Yep.
I say in the book, it's untenable. If you can get that buyer to start to believe that their current state is untenable, not what could I have, not what would happen if, that's another conversation. It's right now where you're sitting. Do you like where you're sitting? Do you want to keep sitting there? Do you want to continue to be at risk to lose your kids because your sorry ass can't figure out how to get ready in less than 3 hours? That's where I plant the seed and win. Once I have you saying this is untenable, I don't want to do this anymore for these reasons and this impact, then we can move you to let's start to solve it.
Yeah, and I feel like the difference there too is the difference between understanding and realizing, right? You may understand that a future problem is a problem, but you don't realize it unless you start to look at your current state and what's already, been happening to you. I love it.
Amen. And what we just did in that whole exercise is you answered your question going back and forth with me. That is the hardest part for salespeople. For the life of them, they cannot understand the difference between trying to get someone's full current state versus what would happen if, what would happen with, if you could. I get all the time when people say they do discovery, do role plays with me, that's how they do it. If we could do this, and what would happen if this, and we live in the future state, have no ability to diagnose.
Yep, I love it. So when you're teaching this, this process, this method to different companies and things like that, and you and I are very in lockstep. Like I fucking hated, I'm probably not supposed to swear like that, scripts. I, with a passion, hate scripts my entire sales career. I've always pushed back against them, and I know you share a common belief, but how do you give a sales organization confidence without giving them scripts that the reps are going to be singing the same song or going to be following, following that process that you're trying to instill, especially over, possibly a larger team?
So one of the things I do is I teach companies how to build what's called a PIC, problem identification chart. The purpose of the problem identification chart is to get organizations to get very real about the problems, the business problems that they solve. Okay. Not the technical, we talk about the technical problems as well, but the business problems. Once you identify what business problems you solve, and let me let everybody know who's listening, there's only 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 per product. You do not solve 100 business problems. Let's be absolutely clear with that right now, right? So there's only a handful. Now, there could be a myriad of technical problems, what I call root causes, that make those problems happen, right? That are the cause of those problems. There could be tons of those. But as far as business problems where the motivation would exist to change is a small handful. So I force companies to do a pick that says, we solve this problem, and we make them write it down in column 1. And then column 2, it's what's the potential impact to an organization if that problem exists. So here's the problem, here's the impact, then what are the root causes? Once you get them to fill that whole thing out, and you give it to the team, and you constantly reinforce it and quiz your team and challenge your team and push your team, it's the first step in actually becoming an expert in the problems you solve. So when they have the conversations, almost every conversation should probably be able to be tracked back to that pick. So I don't need a script anymore. I just have a map, a compass, and it's the pick. It's like I'm trying to find this problem. I know that these are the root causes of this problem. So I can either ask about the problem or I can ask about the root cause, right? And that, this root cause, I know it attaches to this problem. So hey, so you're experiencing disparate systems. Yes. So let me ask you a question. That caused lost data, and that lost data puts you in non-compliance with HIPAA. Yes, yep. Yes. Problem found. I already told you it was on the chart. A root cause, disparate systems. Impact to that is losing data, non-HIPAA compliance. What happens if you're not HIPAA compliant? Fines. Have you ever been fined? I just gave you the freaking decision tree. That's how you do it, and that's how you build the credibility. So I'll come all the way back. Now your team is having business conversations with the buyers around the things that you can solve that make sense to the business people.
And that makes perfect sense because, I forget where I saw this, but, it was some survey back in the past where they said the number one frustration for buyers is that people don't understand their business. So how the hell are you going to solve my problems if you don't understand my business?
Amen. And this gap selling solves that.
Yep. So, and I think we're gathering some questions. We'll do a Q&A in about 5 minutes, and I had a list of 20 other questions that we're not going to get to, but
I know I'm winded today.
Hopefully the good ones, but that means it was a good session. But I'd love to hear like your perspective on, as an example, like I know you believe that kind of this old idea of like the, pushy closer salesperson is kind of this myth that continues to get perpetuated incorrectly. But I'd love to just hear, like, what are some of the other things you're seeing out there in B2B sales where you're just shaking your head going, like, what the fuck are you guys, why are you guys going down that direction? Like, how is this becoming a trend or something that people, seem to be going with?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if there's any new trends. I'm seeing just people doubling down on a lot of the same stuff we've done because you have sales tools. So, the whole idea that it's all about the numbers, more calls is going to get you this, going to get this. Yeah, okay, by definition, the more calls you make, the more, the numbers will flow out. But I don't like the emphasis on the activity, and I don't like the emphasis on that because I think a lot of deals are being lost, right? The old school method about if you're not a quota, get out. Lack of coaching to help teams build to get better. The idea that closing's a thing. The idea that, here's one that drives me crazy. Every manager tells you if people are balking at the price, you haven't showed the value. I agree, but most management doesn't understand what the value is. So they just steal this phrase, but are unable to actually teach people how to actually develop value, because value is unique per buyer. Every buyer is going to measure value differently. And if you think that your product is universal value, you are smoking crack. And I think they push teams. And when you have automation like Outreach and SalesLoft and Navigator and Ring DNA and Ring Central and all this stuff, I think everybody's just trying to just automate everything and drive massive numbers, and they're losing sight of the art and approach to actually selling.
Well, yeah, they're trying to build, a system, a process, a model that doesn't require, any sort of human beings. And, like my, whatever you want to call it, hot take, or my thing that I've always been doubling down on is like, and people haven't felt this pain yet, but they will in the next couple of years, is like the fight against, further automation and AI and all those things. The thing that, hopefully makes us uniquely positioned to be successful through that is our ability to put things into context and to, be able to understand those problems, to understand the problems, to then the impact, to then, communicate those effectively.
Absolutely. Look, I get
the value, because the value, you can't start with the value.
No, you can't. And look, I get automation, and I'm an old school fool, but I'm not an idiot. And I believe that using gap selling terms, the bigger the gap, the bigger the sale and the more complex the sale, right? The idea that says I'm here today and I want to be way over here tomorrow. So a small gap is I need gum because my bad breath. Okay, well, I have bad breath. I want clean breath. That's a tiny gap. That's why it only costs $1 or $2, right? Although I always argue that if I just came out of somewhere and I'm late for a date with, Kate Upton and, and I'm this computer nerd, then that's a massive gap and you're going to pay $20 for that gum, right? So, but generally speaking, it's a small gap. The bigger the gap usually means more complex selling. So I believe that automation is going to creep into some of the smaller gap areas and that require less education and less moving parts. That it can be what I'll call self-serve or very little touch, low touch. But I don't care if you're selling any type of SaaS model, if you're selling any type of equipment that is as a business owner that I have to drop 3, 5, 10, 20, 30, 60 grand, 100 grand, $1 million to buy. I am not doing that without a salesperson, period. I don't care how much I've researched. This is what people miss. I don't care how much I've researched online. I don't care how much information I was able to find. I want someone to talk to. It's a psychology. So if I need someone to talk to make me feel better or to differentiate, that's called the salesperson. And that's where that salesperson better be able to gap sell in order to make a difference.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that, because it is funny. Like, you know, you hear all this all the time about how there's so much information now. The sales already, you know, by the time you talk to them, they've already basically made their decision and things like that. But I actually find, yes, people certainly come, you know, much more prepared and much more information than they ever have before. But to your point, like, there's so much information. They don't even know how the frick to, you know, synthesize it. So they need that person who, you know, can be, you know, build some sort of credibility and trust to then be able to, you know, understand and be able to buy into, like, okay, this will really, you know, solve something for me.
And everybody who's listening, let me help you with this one too, because not enough people talk about it, and I always forget, and people like you bring it out of me. If you believe that the buyer has done a really good job of outlining and mapping out their problems, the impact of the organization, and why they think the need to change, you're smoking meth. The buyer comes to the table in best case scenario and says, I want this. Nobody or very few people have actually made them go more than 2 inches deep about why do you want it? What's going on? What's happened? How long has it happened? How's it affected this? What do you expect to get from outcomes? No one's done that. So as a salesperson, not only is it your ability to help them, you know about your product and do the research, but it's actually to get them to stop and think about why they want to do it in the first place and what's going on. And the value that buyers give you if you successfully do that is off the charts. They're like, you know what? Thank you. I didn't think about this. I wasn't considering this. I didn't take that into consideration. You win.
Yep. Love it. All right. I do think we got some questions coming in. MK.
What's up, guys? Yeah. Oh man, what a powerful conversation. We had a lot of questions coming in both on the chat and also offline too, but I want to address this question that perfectly dovetails on what you were just talking about, Keenan. And this question came in from Mohanad. The question is, he first off opens up and says, like, I love gap selling, which we all do now. We're all fully convinced. But is there a big factor which may impact the effectiveness of gap selling method when the customer knowledge is weak and that they still have underestimated the impact of the problem? That might be tough for you to explain. Like, any tips on that?
So I'm reading this question too. And so I love questions, but sometimes I answer them best when I have more information. I'm a natural gap seller. So I'd like to ask them how about a bazillion more questions, right? So I can make sure I deliver the right answer. Like how my brain thinks. Like, this is where I came up with gap selling, right? He's asking for something from me, my product, which is my knowledge. I want to make sure I get it right. But so I can only guess. And here's what I'm keying in on. When they still underestimate the impact of the problem, which you, quote, which you tried to explain. No. There is no explaining the impact to them. You can only ask questions, right? So using the one with the kids, like, hey, well, you're late for the kids and this could happen, and that could happen. No. It's, hey, what has happened today? What's going on today? Why do you think you need this? Takes me 3 hours to get to work. Get ready for work. Well, why does that matter? Why do you care it takes 3 hours? Well, I'm late to pick up my kids at the end of the day. Well, so what that you're late to pick up the kids? Well, I left them in the rain once. How often have you left them in the rain? Well, only once, but I missed them this many times. How late are you? I'm late an hour and a half sometimes. Do the teachers wait around for you when you're late? They used to, but not anymore. How old are your kids? Well, the youngest one's only 5. So wait a minute. You're telling me there's a 5-year-old sitting out in front of the school late, waiting for you for an hour by themselves? Right? Oh my God, now that you put it that way, yes. Has CPS ever been called? One time. What did they do? They gave me a warning. What happens if CPS calls again? I don't know. I go look it up. If you're called twice from CPS, they make a judgment against the judge. You go through a full evaluation. Right? See what I'm doing here? I don't tell you what the impact is. I keep asking questions until your answers tell you what the impact is. Yeah. If there is no impact, if the answers don't drag me to, I've never been late, my kid's 17, he just goes with a friend, then I got nothing to sell you. Thank you. Let's go somewhere else. Move on.
Yeah, and then actually, hearing you talk about that reminds me of an analogy someone once told me, which I loved, which is like, you don't need to be their brain. You need to be their neck. You don't need to tell them what to think. You need to point them in the right direction,
Yes, yes. And it's through the questions, the art of asking the questions and understanding the connective tissue. And that's the art I can't help with. Like, if you don't know what CPS is, if you don't know what tick-up times are, if you don't understand that young kids are susceptible, but older kids aren't, if you don't understand divorce, if you don't understand those things, then you can't ask those questions, right? Like, if you've never understood drop off and pick up, if you don't know what divorce is, you don't know what marriage is, you don't know what exes are, then you can't ask any of those questions, can you?
Yep.
So therefore, that's the credibility piece.
Yep.
Right? The more I can dig in to those and go deeper in all those areas and know that CPS gives a warning, but a second time they do a whole thing, that's credibility. I didn't know a second time they automatically take them. Like, holy shit, that's credibility. That can't be taught.
Yep.
Nice. I think one thing that this is all implying is the fact that you're actually are able to get in front of the folks that you need to talk to with this. But we had a question come in from Jordan who was saying, like, the single biggest struggle right now is actually getting meetings.
Yes.
Less email responses and answers on the phone. So how can you capture attention in outbound emails and those cold calls that are simple, direct, focused, and really focusing on that current state, not that future state?
Yes. So what I do is I focus on, go back to the pick, build a pick, problem identification chart, know what problems you solve, and first start with trying to target those problems, right? Build your messaging around those problems and the impact of those problems, asking the buyer to engage with you in a discussion of solving the problems. So I always lead with the problems, lay them out. You know who does this really, really well? Is multi-level marketing, right? If you have, how do they start with? Right? They always start with, do you have trouble with, and my favorite for some reason is the Tupperware one. If you've ever seen it, she opens up the Tupperware and all the Tupperware falls on her, right? I mean, so they start with a problem and it's usually slow music and it's gray. And then they get you to buy into the problem and then they shift you to their solution. Well, I think outreach is very similar to that. Can you, and are you aware enough of the problems that your buyers are having and the impact on them? Build your outreach in a way that connects with them on those problems. And then the last piece is something called Intrigue. I'm actually doing a virtual training on this whole thing. And I have an ebook on my website. Intrigue is a unique thing, and I won't spend too much time in it, but you got to have intrigue in emails. And there's actually a psychological element to intrigue. It's called the ACC, the anterior cingular cortex. And it's designed to recognize when patterns are broken. So we have what's called our OCC, our orbital frontal cortex, and that looks around and helps you make decisions and creates patterns. So it says, like, I'm in my house right now, and my brain knows the trees out there do this, and so it doesn't keep looking. But every once in a while, something happens that that breaks it. The ACC says, oh shit, what was that? That's not the norm, right? And it forces me to look up. When those patterns are broken, your mind can't help but get the answer. You can build emails and cold calls leveraging intrigue, and that's mystery, surprise, and knowledge gap. Knowledge gap. So I have a whole thing on that. It's a lot more robust, but that's the other way to do it. You got to create intrigue.
But I think that concept of ACC is really important as we think about where personal fits into gap selling and breaking through the noise or disrupting that continuity that you see in there. And introducing that 5 to 9, which is why we open up today's conversation about both of your passions, is the fact that, like, yes, you have wonderful pedigrees, glowing resumes, but like, who are you as the person fundamentally? And how do you use that to actually parlay into a conversation where you can get at the heart of asking those questions? That's kind of a question for both of you guys.
I'll let you jump on it, Michael.
So I don't know if I fully understood. So you're saying basically, how do you use the personal to, get that initial conversation going more?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're receiving all these cold emails, we're receiving all these phone calls, and a lot of them are starting to look identical, which I think is getting to the heart of like how we are not actually getting those meetings on the calendar, getting our cold calls answered. So to break through, to stimulate the ACC, like Keenan was saying, how do we use personal experience or getting personal with someone, caring about their 5 to 9, caring about the depth that Keenan was talking about, to disrupt that ACC and get the attention that we need so that we can start a conversation?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the biggest thing is it's it's breaking through, you know, the obvious, right? It's breaking through the noise. Like when it's this subconscious thing where I now believe that you have invested enough in me that I'm willing to invest a little something back in you, that you have, you know, invested your scarce resources, which is your time and energy. And, you know, you've made it about me, and it feels more personal. And, you know, it's the whole aspect of, you know, likability. And I know likability is not as important as, you know, credibility, or being able to, you know, actually have an impact for them, because you may buy from people you hate if they have a great product that you really need. And I count myself in that group sometimes. But I do think, especially right now, it's super helpful in just getting people to open up to that conversation, to just, you know, start it, because it's great if you can get someone to answer those questions, but oftentimes they may not even, and I don't know the psychological term for this, but, you know, where they won't break out of kind of that, they just put you into a box, another salesperson into a box, done. And they're not, you know, they don't even hear your questions or what you're saying to them. You're just another salesperson, versus breaking them out of that. You know, I think that's the key to it, is that they just don't see you as another faceless, you know, person selling them.
See, the hard part about what you're asking, MK, is you're asking a phenomenal question. But the difficulty is when it comes to creating intrigue, and when it comes, so what you guys call getting past the noise, I think is the term you use, or something like that. Really what you're saying is, how do I distinguish myself, and how do I break the pattern, right? How do I break the OCC pattern? So, you know, back in the 80s, some smart person, and I'm assuming it's a lady, realized her resume was never being seen. And so we all heard the story of the person who sent her resume on pink paper, right? So if you look at the three things I share with you when it comes to the ACC or the oh shit circuit, that's surprise. Remember I said it's surprise, mystery, knowledge gap, right? She leveraged surprise. Now, what's awesome about that is it works, but it only works until other people think it works, and then everybody's doing it and it doesn't work anymore, right? So surprise is like a one and done, right? Generally speaking, horizontally. There's no depth to it, right? So she did it, it worked for her, maybe worked for the next 5 or 6 or 7 people, like multi-level marketing, and every person after that didn't make a dime, right? So that's surprise. So where I'm going with this is it takes creativity. Everybody wants the silver bullet. Everybody wants the recipe. Everybody wants the playbook. And this is what's hard about what I do, and why once we break through, we do really well, but sometimes hard to break through. I got no silver bullet for you. I only got a framework that works, but you actually have to do something. You actually have to fucking think. I can't tell you what that 5 to 9 approach or strategy is going to be for them. I don't know if you're going to leverage surprise. I don't know if you're going to leverage mystery. I don't know if you're going to leverage knowledge gap, but you need to bring creativity to the table. I can't give you that answer.
Love that. I think that's so important. You got to show up, you got to do the work, and you got to be there and actually care about the person on the receiving end of all of your communication.
Yeah.
Yep.
Phenomenal. Well, gentlemen, we are 3 minutes past the hour mark here. That hour went by lightning quick. We have a few questions that were left unanswered in the chat, but I want to be sensitive to our time today too. Thank you so much for your depth of expertise, for your passion for what you're doing. For those who did not get their questions answered, we will go ahead and actually we'll probably push this over to LinkedIn and maybe answer your questions on LinkedIn for a little bit of banter out there. Thank you, Keenan, so much for your expertise today. It was so great to learn from you. And Mike, thank you so much for keeping that conversation going and for adding such valuable nuggets.
Absolutely.
My pleasure. For those who want those questions on, literally, and I got to do the plug because it's coming up. I'm literally doing a gap selling prospecting virtual webinar, 2 hours over 2 days, May 13th and 14th. So if you hit me up, or I can send you guys the link, we go through everything I talked about, the ACC, the OCC, creating an intrigue, building the emails, etc. So we can get in deeper if it's that important to people.
Perfect. We will send that out as a follow-up to today's session. How's that?
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for joining us. In about 30 minutes, we have yet another session for all you sales reps looking to deploy personal experience in our session called People Buying from People. We will see you in 25 minutes from now for the next speaker session in YOUniverse. Thank you again so much to Keenan and Mike. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mikey.
Thank you, Keenan.
You were good.
It was a pleasure. The pleasure was all mine. Trust me.